Okay. Welcome to our network of Asia Pacific sleep specialists. Okay. Sorry for the echo. Again, welcome to the network of Asia Pacific sleep specialists meeting. This is our very first meeting in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. We have face-to-face attendees as well as virtual attendees. Our attendees come from different countries such as UAE, Saudi Arabia, United States, Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. So we have a big variety of attendees. We hope that this will be a worthwhile and educational venue for all of you. This meeting is approved for 15.5 continuing education credits through the BRPT. A few housekeeping things too. For those physical here, face-to-face, please put your phone on mute, okay, or silent mode. We are recording this. So even those that are virtual, you could either watch this live right now or access it as late as June 2. So you could review the entire meeting numerous times up to as late as June 2nd. Okay. So we'll be starting very shortly. We've got a good lineup of speakers. We have two speakers that have recorded their sessions. They aren't here physically. So let me introduce you the first speaker who isn't here physically, but she has recorded her lecture. Our first speaker is Rebecca Clark-Bash, a very old colleague of mine. I've known her for probably over 25 years. She's a registered EEG tech, evoked potential tech, certified in non-invasive monitoring. She's the president of Knowledge Plus. It's an international education company focusing on the use of electrodiagnostic technology in diagnostic and interventional neurology and surgery. Rebecca works in various missions to Vietnam, Africa, India, and other parts of the world. She's held positions with the WESET, the Western Society of EEG Technologists. She's been the vice president from 2011 to 2015. She's the ASNM secretary treasurer from 2009 to 2010, and current board member of the ASNM Board of Directors from 2000 to 2008. She's on the American Society of EEG Technologists Board of Directors from 1990 to 1995, and was the first technologist given the fellowship status within the ASNM. So without further delay, we'll hear her first topic.
Good morning. Our first lecture today is going to be on instrumentation and filters in polysomnography. Part of this lecture is ideal if you're taking your board exams, but there are a lot of key features of decision-making that are important in routine recordings of polysomnography. I'd like to thank Glenn Roldan, whom you all know. Glenn Roldan invited me to give this lecture. I'm very sorry I can't attend in person, but thank you, Glenn. I'd also like to thank Kim Alaho, who is doing all the Zoom interface so that I'm still able to present this lecture. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Glenn. I'd also like to thank the 2024 Academic Planning Committee. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, email me at opcal@aol.com or knowledgepluspro@gmail.com, and I'll send the handout to you. My background is in EEG, evoked potentials, epilepsy, and neurophysiologic interoperative monitoring. I'm a fellow of the ASNM and a fellow of ASSET. I'm currently on the ASNM board of trustees. That's the neurophysiologic surgical application of neurophysiology. I've previously been on the ASSET board of trustees and the CSET board of trustees. And I really like to have fun when I'm teaching. So I hope we have fun today. I hope I make it interesting. We're going to start talking about filters, the high filter, the low filter, time constant, and the 50 Hertz notch filter. We'll talk about sensitivity. We'll also talk about differential amplification and common mode rejection and chassis leakage current. All of the values for filter settings are derived from the AASM manual for the scoring of sleep and associated events. That's the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. We'll start with filters. Filters function to exclude activity that is not relevant to the nervous system or respiratory system. The high frequency activity is excluded using a separate filter. So most of the time, our high frequency filter is used to get rid of noise, activity that's extraneous to the waveforms that we want to collect. The slow frequency filter has a unique filter, the low filter, and that's used primarily to enhance slow activity like respirations. All filter settings in like channels are always on the same filter setting. So we're going to talk about with EEG and EOG, whether you change these filters, they should be the same in all channels. And I'll show you a little bit about the problems that occur when they aren't, how it can actually change our data to appear abnormal. And then in this example, you'll notice that we have bad high frequency artifact in chin and then in our EEG channels. We don't have any problem down here. Now, if I'm going to institute a 50 Hertz filter or a 15 Hertz filter, I have to do it in all EEG channels. So you see here, we've applied it and it resolved our problem. Now, chin, he doesn't really have time correlation to any of the other waves. So I can set that separately. Now, in this case, they've applied it from the line. Now, none of the other channels had the problem, so we didn't apply the filter. But in all EEG channels and EOG channels, it has to be the same filter setting or notch filter application. All filter settings in like channels are always at the same filter settings. Now, one thing I want to talk about here, from the AASM guidelines for EEG and EOG, they're recommending a high filter of 35 Hertz. We'll talk in a little bit, and we're also going to talk this afternoon about how important it is to use a 70 Hertz high filter, especially if there's a differential between seizure and sleep disorder. So when we talk about using a 70 Hertz high filter, why would I recommend that? Spikes are the signature of seizures. If you have spikes in your EEG, even if you are asymptomatic, there's hard consideration about medicating. Spikes have a duration of, and I don't want to get in the weeds here, but spikes have a duration of 20 to 70 milliseconds, which means they have a frequency of 14.28 to 50 hertz. So if we're using a high filter of 35, it can attenuate, and I'm going to use that word a lot, attenuate. It means amplitude reduction or total removal of spikes from the recording. Using a 50 hertz or notch filter may also minimize the appearance or severity of spike discharges. So when we talk about using a 35 hertz high filter, we can absolutely obliterate the epileptiform activity, the spikes. Now, the bad news is if epilepsy is undiagnosed or seizure is undiagnosed, it doesn't go away. And when a patient is undiagnosed for a period of time, it becomes harder to treat, harder to control. And that's why it's so important to run your suspected seizure patients at 70 hertz. The frequency response curve defines the amplitude change or percent transmitted for specific frequency of activity at a specific filter setting. So here's kind of the old school frequency response curves that we've been using for a good part of 35 years. We're going to talk about the updated method of presentation. Frequency response curves show frequency in hertz plotted against the amplitude of the signal or percent transmitted in either percent or in decibels of decreased voltage. So here we have the newer frequency response curves, where instead of amplitude on the y-axis, they use percent transmitted. Now, on the old school, it is percent amplitude. How much amplitude of waveform will you see if a specific frequency is set at a specific filter setting? This is the high frequency filter. This is the high frequency filter frequency response curve in the percent transmitted format. Reading this graph, the frequency response curve on the y-axis is amplitude or percent transmitted attenuation in percent. The x-axis is the frequency of the EEG activity. And then slash through the middle, these wavy lines, that's your filter setting. In just a bit, we're going to talk about this red bar that goes through the graph. And in a lot of text, it's yellow, but I made it red to really point out, what does this line, what does this arrow mean? Why is it important to us? I want to talk a little bit, and again, this is the old school one. I want to talk a little bit, not about filters. I want to talk about a club that I'm going to form. To get into the club, to be accepted into the club, you have to be only one criteria. You have to be between 1 year old and 70 years old. And if that's true, and a 200-year-old person applied to be in the club, there's a 100% chance he will not be in my club and you will not see him. If I had a 50-year-old person in my club and your filters are set from 1 to 70, he has a 100% chance of being in the club, 0% chance that he will be excluded. Now let's bring that back to EEG and sleep studies. If your filters are set from 1 to 70 and you have a 200 hertz waveform, you will see 0% amplitude and 100% attenuation. However, if I have a 50 hertz waveform and my filters are set between 1 and 70, there's 100% amplitude seen and 0% attenuation. So it's important that you know your target frequency, which is really different between respiratory channels, chin channels, EKG, EEG, to ensure that you include a filter bandwidth or bandpass that covers the target frequencies. Now you would think that if my filters are set from 1 to 70 hertz, 100% of a 1 hertz waveform would be seen in amplitude, and 100% of 70 hertz activity would be seen in amplitude. But it's not true. A unique phenomena happens when frequency equals filter setting. So let's go over here to a 1 hertz waveform on the x-axis. We track that up, and if we have a 1 hertz filter setting, this yellow line is telling us we don't see 100%. We see 70% amplitude, 30% attenuation or amplitude decline. So the basic rule is when the frequency of the physiologic activity, respiration, ECG, EEG, when the frequency of the activity equals the filter setting, you will always have 70% amplitude and 30% attenuation. The first filter we're going to talk about is the high frequency filter. I think about the high frequency filter like the police of fast activity. He's standing at the door of the amplifier with guns drawn, and he knows exactly what frequencies are allowed and what frequencies are not allowed. So if it is in the bandwidth with a high filter inclusive of that frequency, it's allowed in to be processed. If it's above that, let's say it's 80 hertz, he waves them by with his guns and says, nope, you're not coming in here. The high frequency filter is also called the high linear filter. It can also be called the low pass filter because it allows low or slow frequency activity to be passed through to the amplifier. So this high frequency filter reduces the amplitude of fast waves without attenuating amplitude decay, without attenuating slower waves. The high frequency filter introduces a phase lag, meaning if you introduce the high filter, it'll shift your waves out, which is fine if you apply it to like channels equally. And phase lag means the lower the filter setting, the later the time of the wave. So it's important to maintain time relationship between channels. For instance, these are all EEG channels. And when we're looking at this data set, I know this is a little bit more spread out than we see in sleep, but when we're looking at this data set, it's absolutely clear that C3 to CZ and CZ to C4 phase reverse and line up in time. Beautiful. That's a V wave. No question. No question. Now let's imagine that we have our filter set at 1 to 35. And with this filter set, we have very high frequency noise only in CZ to C4 and C4 to T4. So most likely that's from a bad C4. But let's say we didn't check that. Let's say instead we applied a 15 hertz high filter. And let's look at that phase lag phenomenon. When we did that, it created a shift in the channel. So they only applied the filter to CZ to C4 and C4 to T4. And that shift now makes it look nothing like a V wave. It makes it look like a spike. So it's really important when applying a high filter or notch equally in all of the like channels, EEG in this case. The low frequency filter now is also called the low linear filter and high pass. The only thing that the low frequency filter is concerned with is enhancing slow waves. Now, in the low frequency filter, it's defined as in a square wave pulse. And I don't know how many of you do square wave calibration anymore. It really isn't valid in the digital world. It was really a way in the past with paper and pen systems. It allowed us to determine if the pens were screwed down to the pen writer unit adequately such that every channel has the same excursion. And it's really irrelevant in digital EEG. Now, it's defined as the time it takes for a square wave to rise to 63% of its total amplitude. It functions to attenuate slow waves without attenuating fast waves. Just like the high filter, he is only concerned with fast activity. The low frequency filter is only concerned with slow activity. Now, and we see this here, the rise time to 63%, which by definition is what the low frequency filter is. Now, the low frequency filter introduces a phase lead. Now, oddly, those are two, phase lag and phase lead are two dissimilar terms. However, the rule is exactly the same. The lower the filter setting, the later the time of the wave. And the same thing happens with low filter. We want to maintain clear relationship, clear V-wave identification, maintaining the time relationship between all channels of like type. And here we have a change from a 1 Hertz low filter to a 0.1 Hertz, only in the last two channels. And we see the same phenomena. We see a shift that makes this discharge look nothing like a V wave, but rather epileptiform activity. Now, some equipment has not low filter settings, but time constant settings. Now, I want to kind of put into context how important it is to know the difference between an appropriate time constant setting versus a low filter setting. Now, where I see this area of confusion is when a lab converts to a system that uses time constant when they've been using low filter, or vice versa. And I want to give you an analogy about what it's akin to. So it's analogous to miles per hour versus kilometers per hour. So if you get pulled over for speeding in Saigon and you're not familiar with the difference and see the 40 kph sign and you're actually driving 40 miles per hour, you're in big trouble. Because if you're driving 40 miles per hour, that's 64 kilometers per hour. And that induces a 6,000,000. Think about that number, VND fine. The same applies to polysomnography. The punishment for picking the wrong setting is going to distort your sleep study. So time constant on some equipment, such as Nihon Koden, it is expressed in time constant. And if low filter is rise time, fall time is what time constant is. So you see that 37%. The definition of time constant is the time required for the waveform to fall to 37% of the peak deflection produced when a steady voltage, like a cow pulse, is applied to the input of the amplifier. Now, looking at this relationship, the default low filter for, let's say, our EEG channels is 1 Hertz. However, if we used 1 Hertz and it's a time constant unit, the EEG will be all over the place. There will be a lot of sway, making it unreadable. So the appropriate time constant setting is 0.12, not hertz, seconds. So in low filter settings, we use 0.1 and 0.3 to enhance slowing. And we do that on all sleep channels except our DC channels. Time constant, we'd use a 1 or a 0.4 second setting to enhance slowing. Then if we had problems with pulse or sweat, you're going to use a 5 Hertz low filter and then a 0.05 second time constant. So let's see how that might affect some of our channels. So with the low filter, if I'm at 0.1, we get beautiful respirations. If we turn it down to 1, you're not going to get any readable, reliable settings data. So the effect of the low filter on slow activity, we see up here, we're at a low filter of 0.1 or a time constant of 1. We get beautiful data, easy to interpret, easy to stage. However, if we have that low filter at 3, it's really useless to us. We're not going to be able to see significant changes identifying all of the activity we need to stage our sleep study. So DC channels essentially ignores the low cutoff or the low filter to 0. So no slow waves will be prevented from being recorded. The 50 cycle or notch filter reduces the waves in frequencies. Actually, this is the 60 hertz range, but it reduces the frequencies from 48 to 52. And the most common cause is unequal electrode impedances. And it may distort the waveforms, and you really should only use it if needed. So at the start of our recording, we're going to check the impedance prior to the session. They should be all under 5,000 or 5K ohms. We're going to braid the wires together to reduce noise. And I don't mean literally braiding, like braiding hair. I mean bundle them together and put tape around them at various places along the cable. We also want to separate our electrode and jackbox headbox from particularly the power cord. Now, in this example, we only have one channel that has 50 hertz activity. And it was implemented and it did get rid of it. However, we have a rule. The only acceptable time to use that filter is if it's in all channels, all like channels, and we've changed our ground or reference. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, in this sleep study, we had 60 cycle in the eyes, the EG, and the chin. And it's acceptable in this instance to introduce the notch filter, and it cleaned it right out. Great. It's important to plug your equipment into hospital grade outlets. Now, in this example, the outlets are red, but more and more I'm seeing them green. So make sure you're plugged into a hospital grade outlet. So the rules for using the 50 hertz or 50 cycle filter is when you see it in all channels and after you change your ground or system reference. Now, not all systems in sleep have a system reference. So you may or may not have that, but definitely change your ground. And I also want you to know that when you check your impedance, it's possible to cut an electrode partially in half and still get a good impedance on that, an acceptable impedance on that ground. So what I say, if it's in every channel, go ahead and change your ground first. Try to run a little bit. If you still see the egregious noise that'll make this study unreadable, go ahead and use your notch filter. 50 cycle artifact is most often the result of high electrode impedances. So it's appropriate to use the 50 hertz filter in a sleep study. Number 1, when it's in all channels. Number 2, after you've changed the system reference, if you have it on your system, and the ground. If it's only in select channels, it's most likely an impedance problem with either electrode in that pair. Now, sampling rate is specific to the frequency of the activity. That's how many points you're using to resolve, to display the activity. It links to the frequency of the activity that you're collecting. So in the AASM guidelines, they have both the desired sampling rate and the minimum, like what you absolutely would need to record that setting. So I'm not going to go through each of these. Again, you have to make sure that your sampling rate in each channel is set appropriately. Now, it's not uncommon when I'm in the field to have technologists who are aware of low filter, high filter, and notch filter. I don't find many that know even where to change the sampling rate. And that's because most labs don't even train that because they don't want it to get changed and mess up the recording, because it can grossly corrupt your data, not only making it look funny, but make it unreadable. So be aware of your sampling rate, desirable and minimal. And I listed it for every single channel that we record. Now let's talk about sensitivity. So the amplifier sensitivity is defined in microvolts per millimeter. For instance, an example would be 20 microvolts per millimeter. A smaller number results in greater amplification. A bigger number results in less amplification. So that's kind of counterintuitive. If my data is too flat, I need to turn it up. And when I say turn it up, I mean we use a smaller number. So if we started at 20 microvolts per millimeter and we have flat data, I'm going to turn it up then to 10. Does that make sense? So it's counterintuitive. So a bigger number results in less amplification. So if I was using that 20 microvolts, and particularly in children, they have very high amplitude activity, I might want to turn the sensitivity up, which means a smaller number. So to get greater amplification, I might have said that backwards. So to get greater amplification, I'd go to 10 microvolts. So to get less amplification, I'd go to a bigger number, like 30. I think I did say that wrong. But correcting, smaller number gives you greater amplification, and a bigger number results in less amplification. Again, all filter settings in like channels are always on the same sensitivity settings. And I've listed those that need to correlate together. One of the truths is EEG activity and respiratory activity is very specific to the patient. I don't imagine changing low filter and high filter is very common in the sleep study. However, when we're dealing with children, they have very high amplitude activity. So we need to turn the sensitivity down, meaning a bigger number. Now, when we look at these sine waves, you'll notice here, if I'm at a sensitivity of 3, it's squaring off like this. At 7, we get a perfect wave, and at 10, it's almost flat. So again, we want the ideal setting, which may have to be altered at the beginning of the test to an adequate amplifier sensitivity. So again, we're going to talk about the first 10 seconds. Vertical resolution, amplitude resolution is improved by increasing the sensitivity. The sensitivity formula is V over S and D. So I'll give you a better format for that. This is the way I like to see it. V is voltage of the activity, S is sensitivity, and D is deflection. So in a simpler format, to solve for voltage, and this is very board oriented, you take sensitivity multiplied by deflection. That's the height of the wave. To solve for sensitivity, you take voltage divided by deflection. To solve for deflection, it's voltage divided by sensitivity. So here's just a sample of that type of question. Again, back to the square wave. And of course, I know most of you don't do square wave cal anymore, but I want to talk about the first 10 seconds of the EEG and respirations and EKG. Now, in this case, you'll notice if we started at 7 microvolts per millimeter and we turn it to 5, it gets bigger. We turn it to 3, it increases even more. We turn it to 1, it increases even more. So what I want to encourage you to do in the first 10 seconds of your recording, I encourage you to ask yourself the following question. Am I able to read the respirations? Am I able to read the EKG clearly? Am I able to see my chin movement? Am I able to read my EEG? And if the answer to that is no, we have to be concerned about the scorer. If you can't see it, the scorer won't be able to interpret it and won't be able to score, whether that's you or whether that's another individual. So in the first 10 seconds, assess the amplitude of all channels and make a decision about increasing it or decreasing it. Again, the patient population that has the highest amplitude, of course, are kids. In this example, we've increased the number, which result in a decrease in the amplitude. Now, what type of patients, and I'm going to talk about EEG mostly, what type of patients might have really, really low amplitude activity? And the people that have really low amplitude EEG activity are alcoholics, type A individuals, and of course, if they have any altered consciousness, which we wouldn't expect to see in the sleep lab. So in the first 10 seconds, ensure that all channels are adequately amplified to make the job of the scorer easier, more accurate. Differential amplification and common mode rejection. All channels, if you have a common reference, which all systems do not have, all channels are recorded and saved to a common reference on the hard drive. So you have to place an additional reference electrode, or some systems assign it to maybe C3, C4. The best placement for the reference electrode is between FZ and CZ. Now, a faulty reference may cause signal loss. So we have to ensure that we have a well-placed reference if our system dictates that. And the advantage of a system reference is it allows for montage reformatting. So I can look at my waveforms in a different montage. And it's accomplished by combining channels. And that where you exactly place that reference is irrelevant because it's digitally subtracted in the process of differential amplification. So differential amplification, again, it's recorded in the system ref montage. So let's say FP1 to system ref, F7 to system ref. And then on the hard drive, not on the screen, we don't run the system reference montage ever, but on the hard drive, it allows you to save that combination. So why system reference is irrelevant is SR minus SR leaves us with just the two active channels that we wish to record from. Each channel is configured with two electrode inputs. Each waveform is the result of the difference in amplitude and frequency. And then a montage, as you know, is defined as a multi-channel combination of each electrode pair. So differential amplification applies input 1 minus input 2. So you'll get that output voltage from the difference of those two electrodes. Now, why don't we use single channel recordings? We don't use single channel recordings because you get in a single channel recording, you get all of the activity plus all of the noise, and it can obliterate your ability to read the study. So when we have a differential amplification, you'll have active activity at O1 and noise. We'll get noise in there too, at same amplitude, and then in input 2, we'll record active activity and noise. So the advantage of differential amplification is it cancels noise, so that we're just looking then activity at O1. And noise, we'll get noise in there too. And same amplitude, and then in input 2, we'll record active activity and noise. So the advantage of differential amplification is it cancels noise, so that we're just looking then yes, it meets the criteria of below 5. But what criteria it doesn't meet is being balanced. That difference is more than 4 k-ohms. So it would be actually better. I'm not encouraging this. This is a theoretical statement. It would actually be better if they're both at 6 k-ohms, because then the noise amplitude will be the same and it will cancel out. To be clear, I'm not advocating for allowing impedances over 5, for example, only. So what I would do in this case, even though C4 is at 4.9, I try to get that more in line with what CZ is, if that makes sense. In the guidelines, it says common mode rejection ratio, minimum should be 80 dB. 90 dB is what ACNS states. Now, what that rejection ratio is, it's a figure of merit which describes the degree to which the amplifier will reject a common mode signal. So it deals with the quality of the ability of the common mode rejection to influence our recording. They also say the ratio of in-phase to out-of-phase signals should be 10,000 to 1 minimum. Now, I don't think you have to worry about this because really all of our equipment now blows it out of the water, far above minimum requirements. The primary artifacts reduced by common mode rejection ratio is 50 hertz and radio frequency noise. Not all noise is electrical. Our lab was right next to the page operators, and whenever they paged, we got a little ziggy 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 on our recording, and we ended up having to copper shield the room, which was very expensive. But it turning on the 50 hertz filter did not help. So the key factor in eliminating noise and taking advantage of the common mode rejection ratio is to have balanced electrodes. Not, yes, low impedance, but they have to be balanced. With common mode rejection, is that based on amplitude of the signal, frequency of the signal, cycle, or latency? So I ask this question in every class I teach. Now we can get rid of latency because that has no valid interest in our noise factor. Cycle, we don't see that word in the literature very much. When I teach this in class, techs tend to select amplitude or frequency. And if they say amplitude, I say no, not amplitude. They then pick frequency. So I'll explain to you why neither of those terms are correct. Again, in differential amplification, if the activity in electrode 1 and the activity in electrode 2 are the same, you get a flat line or cancellation. So electrodes record both noise and physiologic activity. So noise will cancel, and in EMG, respiration, EKG, that will be the only activity left displayed on the screen. So let's imagine that you guessed frequency. Does common mode rejection reject on the basis of frequency? In this example, we have same frequency, 5 hertz, but different amplitudes. So this will not cancel. Now, what you're going to get is noise if I subtract the amplitude and frequency of electrode 1 from electrode 2. You're still going to see the 5 hertz activity, but you're going to get half the height of that noise. Could it potentially reject on the basis of amplitude? In this example, electrode 1 is a 20 microvolt signal. Electrode 2 is a 20 microvolt signal. Same amplitude, different frequency. This will not cancel. Does common mode rejection reject on the basis of polarity or phase? So in this example, we have same frequency, 20 microvolts, same amplitude, 20 microvolts, same frequency. Only in this example will it cancel. Now, the third feature of Value of common mode rejection. They have to be in the same phase or polarity. They can't be in opposite polarity. So the answer to this question is amplitude and frequency, phase or polarity. The term they use for that is cycle. Cancellation occurs, of course, we talked about this already. Cancellation occurs when both electrodes in the pair are equal or near equal amplitude, resulting in a low amplitude or flat line. Cancellation is a word they apply also to salt bridges. And now they're more commonly using the term electrolyte. Too much electrolyte, like salt jelly, which they don't really use anymore, is spread between two electrodes, you'll get a flat line. Salt bridges will never cause 50 cycle artifact. So electrolyte are products like 1020, Elafix, EC3. This is your conductive paste and also used to affix the electrodes. So the recording, the data we're recording does not come from the area of the electrode. The record waveforms are recorded from the area under the paste. So if you have more paste on the edges of the electrode, that's your surface recording area. I did a training 2 years ago, and they had called because they couldn't understand why their EEG waveforms didn't look like they did in the textbooks. And I checked everything. They had the appropriate sensitivity. They had the appropriate impedance validation. I couldn't figure out how this possibly could be true. And it was happening on every patient. So there had to be some influence. So I decided I needed to come out and actually do some training and watch what they're doing. And I've only seen this at one hospital, but what they were doing, they called it frosting the tape. So they would fill the cup with an appropriate amount of 1020 cream. They place it on the head, and then they take tape and they butter it up with more 1020, big area, and slap it over the electrode. Now, they did not understand that that entire cream area was the recording surface, and they were getting cancellation or reduction in amplitude because the electrodes then, the recording area then was too close together. So cancellation in salt bridges, we typically see recommendations for the distance, in this example, between the two chin electrodes. If those two are too close together, or you have your patches so near each other, you're going to have a really low yield recording for your chin. So ensure that you use distance as ascribed by whatever reference you're using. Again, salt bridge is also called electrolyte bridge. Salt bridges aren't just caused by conductive paste. It can also be caused by sweat. Sweat is a salty conductor and can actually cause the same cancellation that we see with too much paste, too much conductive paste. Salt bridges can be caused by excessive sweating, hyperhidrosis, and hyperhidrosis can be caused by thyroid disease, menopause, and medication. And of course, in obese patients, especially if your lab is a little on the warm side. So make sure when you're setting up your patient that you very quickly use alcohol prep to dry the area, dry the sweat off the patient. Salt bridges can also be caused by electrodes being too close together. You see this lady, she has patch electrodes, which is fine, it's fine, but they're touching. That channel is going to be very insensitive to leg movement. So it's important to have the recording surface at least 3 centimeters apart from one another. What's going to happen in this case is this patient, and it's also the case with sweating, it's also the case with chin EMG. If there's a salt bridge, it's going to look like you have no chin EMG, and it's going to look like you have no leg movement, which would miss a lot of sleep disorders in the scoring process. So ensure that all of your recording electrodes are at least 3 centimeters apart. And I don't necessarily like these large patch electrodes. I'm kind of akin to a smaller patch electrode. In all of these scenarios, in sweat, in instances where we have our electrodes too close together, and in instances where we've had cream extend between two electrodes, all of these scenarios would produce flat lines in those channels, which would make scoring impossible. And let me also say, impedance will be normal. It'll look great, but when you go to record, differential amplification is going to cause a flat line. When we talk about electrodes, if we have multiple metal types in our lab, using one, for instance, gold and one silver chloride electrode in the same channel results in not high impedance recordings, not 50 cycle artifact, but rather activity that looks like real physiologic activity, representing the difference between the metal value. So these are called bias potentials from the differential amplification of the different charge of each metal. So we would never want to have a gold and a silver chloride electrode. Now understand, it only applies if they're in the same channel. So if you use silver patch electrodes on the body, but all gold on the head, that wouldn't influence it. In a single channel, it has to be the same metal. All electrodes must be the same metal to prevent bias potentials. And let's take a look, meaning the activity that looks real, but isn't actually physiologic. So let's take a look in that scenario where I talked about a silver chloride electrode, reference to a gold electrode. This comes with a big inter-electrode difference in the resting charge of the metal. And you're going to get activity on the screen that is not real. The best recording electrode is chlorided silver disc electrodes, and that's AgCl. Now, for a long time, and you might find in some of your older labs, everyone says, no, the best electrode is gold. And that used to be true, because guess what gold electrodes, guess what they were made out of? They were made out of gold, pure gold. Now, because of the cost of gold, they are gold coated, which really makes them a lesser choice compared to silver chlorided electrodes. Chassis leakage current. Now, that's a weird term. It's a biomedical term, and most of us don't relate to that term. What chassis leakage current is, it's the biomedical engineering electrical safety check. It's performed annually or semi-annually to make sure that there's no current coming out of that equipment that might harm the patient. Every time you touch your keyboard, every time you touch your TV set, there is current flowing into your body. But there has to be a safe limit and an unsafe limit. We can't entirely control leakage current. So the biomedical engineering department tests the equipment either once or twice a year, and if it exceeds that, the equipment must be taken offline and sent back into the manufacturer to be repaired. The standard for chassis leakage current is it cannot exceed 100 microamps root mean squared with ground open. Now, that isn't important information for you to know because biomedical engineering has that standard. And it might be a little more, it might be a little less, but they control when they check the equipment, whether it passes or whether it fails. So nothing you need to know, but you need to know that we have to do the chassis leakage current test. And again, here's how we all look after a long night in the sleep lab. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed my time with you. Again, wish I could be there.
I'm not sure if our online attendees can hear me. Please go into the chat. I apologize for some of the technical issues, but we are working quite a bit hard on that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send out the message on the chat and we will reach out to Rebecca for answers. So if we don't have any questions right now, we'll just set up for our next speaker. Just give us a few minutes. Thank you. Is everybody okay? Did everyone get some coffee? Okay, so we're up for our next presenter, and I really hope I can do justice introducing our next speaker. Please apologize if I don't, because he has a massive, very comprehensive CV. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Duan Wei Sei. He is the president of Lam Duong Medical College, director of Biomedical Research Center and Sleep Lab Center in Dalat, Vietnam. Dr. Sei is a hospital practitioner, PH attaché of Cochin Hospital and researcher of pathophysiology of the airways and respiratory unit, UPRES, in Descartes University, Paris, France. His studies include post-PhD on pathophysiology of respiratory airways, PhD of Sciences, pathology of respiratory airways, in post-university diploma of methods and techniques in pulmonology, post-university diploma in respiratory diseases, a second degree, and Master of Science, pathology of respiratory airways in University in Paris, France. He's the director of Lam Duong Medical College and Biomedical Research Center in Dalat, Vietnam, professor of immunoallergology at Penn State University of Medicine in USA from 2016 until now. He's also the president of the Vietnam Sleep Society. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Sway.
First of all, I would like to thank you very much, Glenn and Clem, for inviting me to be here. And I would like to thank also the organizing committees. And so currently, the most important and hot topic is the personalization in medicine. Why not in our side? I say that's why my topic focus on these areas. And so, because in management of OSA, we have the different approaches between the Western and Asia, especially in Asia countries, we have the increase the prevalence of OSA. That's why, we should have the accurate approach to manage the patient with OSA, even in Vietnam. And so here is the plan.
Jan, dyan pa yata, tatapusin ko lang ito, check ko.
First is some overview about OSA because audience we have some technologies and all, and after that, to personalize OSA, we should know about the mechanism of pathophysiology of OSA, and we talk about the phenotype, and after that we focus on diagnosis and treatment of OSA, and after how to modulate or to personalize the OSA in each country, especially in the Western and in versus in Asia. And after that, we have some conclusion. Next slide, please. And so for OSA, it's a very common disease and with a very high prevalence worldwide. And so the problem is that the disease vary depend on the age. For children, for elderly, we have different kinds of OSA, even for pregnant women. And so, and even between the target population, we have different approaches for those with the comorbidities with cardiovascular disease. We have the different managements in compared to, for example, for respiratory diseases. And by definition, very easy. OSA is defined as the collapse of the airway during sleep for the lasting more 10 seconds. And the consequence of OSA related mainly due to intermittent hypoxia, and it induces oxidative stress, and it's explained all the target consequence of OSA in the whole population. And so for the symptom of OSA, for other we know very well, if there's some sleepiness, we have the snoring, we have the stop breathing during sleep. And so currently, the recommendation of ASM is we by only in AHI. Although I not, it's only the index, it not cover all the severity of OSA, because some subjects with my OSA, but there's how to say, the both are prevented last for a long time. With the nadir SpO2 more severe than those with only the high hypopnea. So it it's not only the objective index, but not brings to us the objective severity of OSA. And for the treatment, okay, for the treatment of OSA, we have mainly based on CPAP, and after that we have the weight loss, and we have the different methods. We will discuss it later. And but currently we know the conventional approaches for OSA not adequate, because even in the state we have more than 60% people with OSA who under diagnosis and treatment. Why? And so because of the it lack of the personalized approaches for OSA. And some general information about the prevalence of OSA in Vietnam. Our study showed that for adults more than 18 years, we have 8.5%. And currently in worldwide, we have the prevalence of OSA is very, very high. In some countries, more than 50%, especially for those with comorbidities, with the cardiovascular diseases, with diabetes. We have very high prevalence. And yesterday, I talked about in different cities in Vietnam, in the endocrinology and diabetes congress about the how to say the impact of OSA on the metabolic syndrome and even in the NAFO disease. And now we say that the muscle disease, metabolic dysfunction associated with steatotic liver disease. And so we have the very, very big issue in this topic. And here we can see currently we have about nearly 1 billion people in the world have OSA. Especially we have 10 countries. You can see here in USA we have more than 50 million people with OSA, and in France and Germany nearly 1/3 of population have OSA. And even in Japan, in China, we have more than 170 million people with OSA. And in Malaysia, Malaysian people more than 30 years old, about 14 million, we have 10 million with OSA. That's why last year, Malaysian Society of Sleep Medicine published the guideline on it linked to due to the obesity. And even in this figure, you can see some country we have the prevalence of OSA more than 50%. So in this study, estimated that the prevalence of OSA in Vietnam is about 9.5, but adults more than 30 a year. And so we can say that OSA is very, very severe disease because it can, the consequence of OSA is related to cardiovascular diseases and cardiovascular events, and even, we don't have the good quality of life, especially in children. We have many, many consequences. And so that's why we should try to screen in the subjects with OSA. And in this slide, to show you the consequence of OSA due to the intermittent hypoxia, due to the sleep fragmentations, and induced hypertension, atherosclerosis, coronary diseases, and also the metabolic syndrome. So I use this figure to convince the patient to take care of their OSA, especially for the treatment with CPAP, because in Vietnam, the CPAP is not reimbursed by insurance. That's why, the patient should buy it by themselves. And how to convince them? I use the reason of the previous study to say that if the patient subject with severe OSA, the chance of survival after 10 years less than 80%. They have about 25% of the mortality. And so if they treat with CPAP, you have That CPAP will normalize the survival rate, you know, and so it's a very important message to convince the patients. And so recently we published a review on the personalization in medicine for OSA. It's the first one because until now we don't talk so much about the personalized OSA in general population. And the aim of this approach to manage well for diagnosis and treatment subject with OSA. And we will discuss in detail. And so we have some co-author, even with different field, multidisciplinary specialists in this review. Respiratory diseases, we have the cardiovascular specialists, we also the psychology and neurologists, and Dr. Huang, the specialist in sleep medicine and also in respiratory diseases. And so some information about the phenotypes of OSA. You know, basically, OSA we have three different kinds of phenotype. Firstly, we have the airway collapsibility with the Starkland residual model, and after that, we have the low respiratory arousal threshold. We have the high loop gain, and also we have the bull muscular responsiveness. You know, we will discuss in the next session. But it's not enough to take care of OSA, because how to measure this in clinical practice? It's not easy. That's why we should have the different clinical phenotypes and with different approaches based on the personalization of OSA. And so some slides about OSA phenotype. And firstly, we talk about the upper airway collapsibility. It's a figure I draw it to contribute to the chapter of textbook of sleep and circadian edited by Professor Clegg Kashuda. It will publish soon, and we have the final version recently. And so you know, it explains those you know, with the collapsibility of the pharyngeal area during sleep due to, you know, the increase of upper or lower downstreams with the flow. For example, if you have the, look at now, we have the collapse of the upper airway during sleep. And so it's a Starkland residual model, you know. And so we can see mainly in the elderly people. And this figure only to summarize the mechanism of Starkland residual model. If we have the upstream or downstream pressure, it train the critical pressure, it collapses the airway during sleep. And I figure out in this slide, we figure out how to train the upstream pressure, downstream pressure. You can downstream pressure, we can see in the OLD, obstructive lung disease and OSA. And so for upstream pressure, we have the allergic rhinitis, and we use the term arosa. And also with the collapse of the airway, upper airway by Starkland residual model, and we have OSA. And now, beside of the airway collapsibility, we have other phenotype of sleep apnea. We have, firstly, we have low respiratory arousal threshold. It's very interesting. We can estimate it. And after that, we have high loop gain. We have the bull muscular responsiveness, and we have it's a classical phenotypes of OSA. But how to measure is in the clinical practice. It's for study almost. And firstly, we will discuss about the low respiratory arousal threshold. You know, for those with low arousal threshold, LAT, can estimate it. They have the high level of PCO2, but beside of low, we have only high respiratory arousal threshold. You know, we with the hypocapnia and severe hypercapnia. And so currently we can measure the transcutaneous PaCO2 to estimate, but we should do the PHG at the same time to analyze the arousal at the same time. And so, you know, it's not easy to find out the subject with low respiratory arousal threshold. And so the next one, phenotype is the high loop gain. High loop gain, when we talk about high loop gain, we also have low loop gain. How to differentiate between high and low loop gain? And high loop gain we can measure by, you know, the subjects with OSA with high loop gain. We have almost the hypocapnia, and you know, we can state that with excessive response of respiration during sleep. And so, you know, it's not easy to state that those with high or low loop gains in, you know, with 1 billion people worldwide, how to analyze in the primary care, you know, it's not easy. And the last one is about the last phenotype. It's poor muscular responsiveness. You know, those with poor muscular responsiveness, we can see that for the elderly people with OSA, we can see that those for the woman after 50 years, that was the very accurate symptom size of the you know, the menopause in women is that they start to snore during sleep. If you are after 50 years old, women start to snore, and the prevalence of OSA in the men and women after 50 years the same. And now we talk about very briefly about the current diagnosis and treatment. This guideline we published before last year with the Asia Pacific Society of Cardiology. Is very useful for Asia country because you know, we have the clinical approach, and after we can give the stopping. Vietnamese subjects with OSA, we have almost more than 2 thoughts with myelopathy grade 3 or 4. I think that's why the prevalence of OSA in Asia countries is nearly similar to the Western country. Especially we should focus on the dose for cleaning up OSA with the comorbidities. And so I also gave Glenn and Clem about the guideline of Vietnamese Society of OSA. It then nearly the same approach with this guideline from other European country. And so, you know, very easy. It depends on the clinical examination. We have the low and high probability with the comorbidities. After that, we can do the respiratory polygraphy, the PHG level 3, and at home and somewhere else. And after that, we can use a index to to differentiate the mild, moderate, or severe OSA. You know very well about that. And after that, it depends on the comorbidities of the cause of OSA. For children, you don't use CPAP. Rarely in Vietnam, we have with our college, we about less than 20 children with our OSA, and we treat with the CPAP because the adherence very poor. And so after that, based mainly on AHI, and also with yield nadir SpO2 or mean SpO2 Epworth scale score and BMI and cardiovascular event to evaluate the severity of OSA to have the target treatment. Here is in my sleep lab. This one is PHE level 1 at the sleep lab. And so recently we have the at home sleep apnea statin, but I use it to do hotel sleep apnea statin. My patients from other provinces stay in the hotel. I would like to put them in the hotel to have the very good and environment for sleep. And so hotel sleep apnea testing and for children with PHE level 3, it's easy to do it. It's less costly than PHE. And so for the treatment, we have some basic treatments with, sleep hygiene, weight glass, and avoid to drink alcohol, and also smoke before sleep. And after that, we have the positional treatment, very well. It become the main treatment in Vietnam because, it's easy to do. And especially for those with airway collapsibility, positional treatment is the main treatment, not the CPAP. And after that, for severe patient, we have a moderate patient subjects with OSA, with cardiovascular disease, with the neurological diseases, with some, stroke with CPAP, and have the auto CPAP. It's easy to manage. In some cases, those with COPD with hydration. Here we have the specialist of CPAP titration doctor. The teacher of sleep medicine with the BSSM. And we have the other treatment. We have the,
inviting you to listen to 1 hour of the greatest and latest hits of all time. Format, awesome mix of knowledge, requests, and personal picks that you can add to your favorite.
Decided the ENT intervention or not, we do DICE. And now we get in Vietnam, we start to do that. And after that, we have some, some intervention. And so we have the tonsillectomy. This study we published with more than 150 children in the National Children's Hospital in Hanoi, and with grade 3 or 4 we do the tonsillectomy with level 1 or 3. Grade 1 3 we treat with anti-leukotriene. And the case we use the Plateau in Saigon with my ENT college. And we also have the hypoglossal nerve stimulation. And until now, we have about 5,000 subjects with OSA treated with this method, especially 2/3 in stay, 1/3 in Germany and in German. And in Singapore, Dr. Tong start to do that, for some cases, and especially for those with the poor muscular responsiveness. And so it's the new method for Asia. And after that, we have the mandibular advanced device. We have the specialists from Texas. And so in Vietnam, it's not developed because we don't have the dentist can do that. And so it's the second, the third line treatment in Vietnam. And after that, we have some application to train the, the malfunctional therapy with our application. And we found out more easier for Vietnamese people because almost Vietnamese people can sing, try to sing every day in the morning during karaoke, and they can use the trumpet to to enhance the muscular responsiveness. And now I ask Miss Deep to introduce in Vietnam the trumpet from the Australian minority they use it, and very, very efficacious. And the last one we learn about how to personalize OSA in general population. How about the idea? And so it's very simple, it's very easy. Firstly, we have the general approaches. We use the stop band, we have the app work, we have the clinical examination, and after that we have the high probability of OSA, and after that we have the personalized approach. We have three areas. Firstly, the causes of OSA. If for children with hypertonsy, we do the ENT intervention, or the clinical phenotypes. And after that, we have the age. Based on the age of the subject with OSA, we have different. We personalize the diagnosis and treatment. For elderly, we don't see CPAP at the first line treatment. And after that, we have the comorbidity. It's very, very important because if the subjects with OSA and they also have the allergic rhinitis, how to treat it? You should treat the nose before the diagnosis of OSA. Even if we have treat the blockage, now we have the reduce the AHI, and we have don't need to do more intervention, even CPAP. And our OSA, the allergic rhinitis and OSA, we have also obstructive lung disease and OSA. We have the Cavadosa. It's the term we in our review we invent to use to shorten the term. Cavadosa is mean the cardiovascular disease and OSA. We have the Comisa already presented some couple of years ago, comorbid insomnia and OSA. We also at Down syndrome and OSA. And so after that, we personalize the treatment for these patients. And for children, very briefly, we have besides some hereditary syndrome, we also have, the different symptom of children. It's completely different from adults, especially, for children, we have the daytime symptom with ADHD, hyperreactivity, and, it's the main symptom. And also we have the very different consequences of OSA in children. And finally, we have 4 main causes of OSA in children. The first one, even if it's Vietnam, not obesity. In Vietnam, it's adenotonsillar hypertrophy. That's why, we do the tonsillectomy. It's the first line treatment. And after that, we have some more cardiovascular structure. We have some congenital diseases that very easy to diagnose it. And after that, for elderly, how to have the accurate diagnosis and treatment with elderly people with OSA, because the outcomes of them is different from children or general adults with OSA. And so for elderly people, you know, the increase the prevalence of OSA due to the increase the poor muscular responsiveness, and also due to the airway collapsibility due to age. Even in women, we have the lack of estrogen. And so currently we use the cellular nation angle to estimate the retrograde, and after that, you know, you can use the MAD, or even we can use the muscular intervention for some people. And for those with comorbidities, it's very interesting because this figure we discussed a little bit before, you know, for upstream pressure, downstream pressure, you know, the trend, if we increase upstream or downstream pressure, we have the collapse of the airway due to the Starling resistor model. Even if you tonight you check you into block your nose, breathe in by mouth, it collapses the pharyngeal areas. Very interesting. And you should treat the nose before treating OSA. And now we talk about Ondosa. Ondosa is obstructive disease and OSA. We have two different diseases here. We have the COPD, we have asthma. Yeah. It's very interesting because we have the cross talks, we have the bi-direction relationship. I will try to talk a little bit about that. Firstly, for asthma, imagine you sometime those with asthma have the instability of the airway controls. Asthma subjects have very high prevalence of OSA, you know, the independent risk factor. And inversely, if the OSA subject have asthma, they have the imbalance of the TA1 and TA2. It, you know, even induce the remodeling of the airway. It make asthma more severe and under uncontrolled. And for COPD, patients with OSA is the first year of the term overlap is for COPD and OSA in 1993. We have some little protective factor to prevent OSA, especially hyperinflation, but it's not good because the people with COPD with hyperinflation have a very, very deep ear, especially in SSI. And so for risk factor, the use of cortical, inhaled corticosteroid in general, or systemic corticosteroid use, and also we have rostral leadership. We have the witness of muscle and muscular responsiveness. And after that, the last comorbidities I would like to present here is the cardiovascular diseases, because we don't have time with many the comorbidities. We have the stroke with OSA, we have the Parkinson with OSA, Alzheimer with OSA, we have even in diabetes with OSA, and so try focus on, for example. And the last one is cardiovascular diseases. We have the blood gel, you know, very easy to do. If the subjects with for screening with Epworth scale or stopping, we have some risk factor for OSA with the other problems, and we can do the level 3 PHG, and after that, based on the AHI, moderate or severe, we can treat with CPAP, the first line treatment, and after that, we can use the the second line with MAD, but not in Vietnam. And mainly it weight loss are the most important approaches. We should optimize the treatment of comorbidities first, and after that we treat the OSA. Even for those with comorbid insomnia and OSA, we should, CPAP and the sleep pills or not. And so it really the personalization of the management of OSA. And so for conclusion, and we have some messages. Firstly, personalized medicine with OSA should be based on the phenotypes of OSA, and currently we have three main kinds of phenotypes of OSA. We have the airway collapsibility, we have the low respiratory arousal threshold. We also have the the high loop gain, and you can estimate it by clinically. And after that, we have the poor muscular response stiffness. And so personalized medicine in patient with OSA for us based mainly on clinical features. And so try to phenotyping OSA subject with clinical symptoms and the cause of OSA. And finally, why we should personalize the management of OSA subject, because we should have the effective treatment and to avoid the negative consequences of OSA on the population. And so that is the overview of my topic, because I don't have time to talk in detail. And so to give you the idea to personalize the special approaches based on the target population, based on the race, based on the country's healthcare resources, and to globally to have the good management for subjects with OSA. Thank you for your attention, and I'm also sorry because I have an appointment at 10 a.m. and so I should leave, and I hope that you have the excellent conference, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Thank you. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Glenn.
Thank you so much, Dr. Say, for the talk. We appreciate you coming over and presenting to us. And now, actually, it's perfect that we got, that he was able to present very succinctly. And so what we're going to do next is to have some FaceTime with our sponsors. We're going to be going on a break for 30 minutes. So we'll see you back in here around 10:25 so that we can restart back on time at 10:30. Thank you again for your attention. All right, please meet our sponsors outside. Thank you.